What are we gonna do when the apple juice runs out? That's such a ritual now. I need it, or else I can't start.
Welcome back to another episode of Is Fitz Happy? I'm Luke.
And I'm Emma.
This week we're discussing Chapter 21 of Royal Assassin, Dark Days. And we begin here with a introduction of what the Mountain Kingdom was up to, specifically King Aod, and the ruling structure that we already knew about, but specifically what would happen when he passes away, and then rule would come to Kettricken, and the Mountain Kingdom would kind of be absorbed into a seventh duchy. And that's why Kettricken is much more worried about possible civil war, because then the inner duchies would stand between her on the coast and the Mountain Kingdom. She has to worry about her people in the Mountain Kingdom and her people in the coastline, as well as, you know, the inner two duchies.
Right.
And so we get into this story with Duke Brawndy and two of his daughters at Buckkeep, and they kind of got almost dismissed at dinner with Regal.
Last chapter,
yes. And a storm has set upon the castle, so there's not really much going on, and pretty much every day Fitz sees Duke Brawndy and his two daughters just hanging out in the Great Hall, waiting for the king to get better to see them.
Right. And it's made note that it's more of an affront and rudeness to Duke Brawndy the longer he has to wait.
Right.
Because that means that the king is trivializing his issues.
Trivializing? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just like basically belittling him and making it seem like, oh, it's not a big issue. It can wait because there's more important things I have to take care of.
Yes.
But when in fact we know he probably isn't feeling well. The king, that is. And so one of these days, Fitz was hanging out in the Great Hall, and he sees Kettricken sweeping in with a relatively simple dress and some, preceded only by Rosemary and two of her ladies,
right.
Hope and Modest.
This is actually
Hopeful.
the first day of waiting.
Oh, is it the first day?
Yes.
Oh.
He has been checked in on
That's right.
4 times by Fitz now, but it is all on the first day. He does wait a week to see the king, but he is talked to by Kettricken
That's
on
what
the
I
first
mixed
day.
up. It's all said within the first, chapter and a half. On the first day, she comes in and asks him to join her for a meal. Sit down in a little gathering, and he reluctantly agrees, but is pleased that she came down herself, shook his hand, greeted him. There's some contact from the royal family instead of just him left hanging.
Right.
And so he agrees, and Kettricken sweeps together this great meal. Obviously, she had it all planned out already, and selected a few people from around the Great Hall, including very interesting people who are interesting in their own rights and can have stories to tell, are musicians, or are of a like age to his daughters, or are good listeners.
There's also a lot of talk about the etiquette in this portion, specifically calling out to Kettricken physically shaking the Duke's hand, which Fitz remarks that she probably doesn't realize how big of an honor that is for him.
Right.
And she says, I personally went to see the king twice already this morning, and he was ill both times. So just so you know, kind of smoothing over the tensions of, I'm the queen in waiting and I couldn't even get in to see him. It is not you. If you don't see him today, he is not well. And then also when she seats the Duke, she seats him at her right hand, which again Fitz mentions as something that Kettricken probably doesn't realize is a big deal, which
I feel like she might.
I think the whole time she knows everything she's doing is a big deal. There's a lot of talk from Fitz a lot around Kettricken of she probably has no idea because she's a foreigner. And this is just such a crazy good thing. It's crazy luck that she happens to be doing everything that'll make him feel better. And it's like, Fitz, she's lived here for over a year. I think she understands the custom of the people. And she has also been living in the heat of being a royal at the castle for a year. So yes, she probably does know what she's doing. Fitz, it's not that wild. Other people can also manipulate people by doing small things.
Yeah. I feel like some of what she's doing would just be her
right, I'm not
nature and what she would do naturally, but I do think she is aware that she's trying to smooth over things and doing everything that she knows how to make him feel honored.
I don't think she's doing it in a way that Regal would go about it with deceit in mind, but it's still a sort of manipulation that comes from her being a good person, but still it's a little, but it is frustrating to read Fitz over and over. She probably has no idea. This is great. Like, Fitz, come on. Just because she's not you doesn't mean she doesn't have a brain. I don't know. So that was a little frustrating to read this chapter of Fitz constantly downplaying what she's doing almost in a way by saying that she probably doesn't realize what she's doing. And especially by the end of the chapter where we see the big moves she makes to make the Duke feel better, I feel as though it's just not great to have him constantly be thinking that she's this poor young foreigner who has no idea what's going on, and he has like so little faith in her ability to catch on, I guess. I don't know.
I wonder how much that is Verity bleeding into his thoughts, because that scene at the end that you mentioned, Verity is heavily influencing how Fitz is reacting to it.
True, yeah.
So I'm kind of just curious, like, I wonder if we've talked about this before, different thoughts and his feelings towards things bleed in and kind of blend with what Fitz is thinking and feeling. I'm wondering if that's happening here too with his general thoughts towards Kettricken.
That could be, definitely. That would make me feel a little bit better, just because she's a very capable woman and she has been this whole time.
And Fitz has noted that as well.
Yeah. So it's like really frustrating this far in to have Fitz be like, whoa, it's so wild.
And so they sit down to this dinner, and again, Queen Kettricken has selected people very carefully to provide entertainment and also, the most important part, to have them listen to Duke Brawndy when she asks what has happened. We haven't heard the full tale. Brawndy, of course, is a little bit reluctant to say it because he hasn't even spoken to the king yet. However, he does spell out the whole tale, and Kettricken expresses her grief and that for herself, she won't let the people of Fairy go hungry. And
she doesn't just call them the people of Fairy, she calls them my people.
Yes.
And it's very specifically said twice that these are her, she views them as her people still. I just want to make sure that gets pointed out.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, she specifically says, I will say that my heart is full of grief for my people and anger. I promise you that, for myself, these wrongs shall not go unredressed, nor shall my folk be left shelterless in winter's bite. Duke Brawndy he's not fully charmed by her and is just going to cast aside all of his anger and his questions because she is putting on a front to make him feel welcome and feel that he is heard. And Fitz goes into that a couple times, just saying like, oh, he's definitely like smooth as feathers with this play that Kettricken did, but he's not easily charmed because he's from the wild north. But with that being said, Kettricken says, I will take care of my folk, and Duke Brawndy kind of retaliates and says, yeah, those are just words though. Like those have to be backed up. Yeah. And I have to hear them from the king, basically. Yeah.
Well, you can't eat words, so yeah. It's a little bit important to have more authority. And she says she can't do anything until the king has officially heard him.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is a big caveat in this whole thing, is she is just a queen in waiting, and so she cannot act until the king has acted.
Mm-hmm. And he brings up the big questions that Fitz and Chade and Kettricken went through as well. Like, where were the signals? Where were the ship that was supposed to be posted out there? All of those things. And Kettricken again has to say that she doesn't know those answers and is shamed by that. And Fitz's alarms bells are kind of going off and like, oh, maybe she shouldn't be saying all of this because, it's not politically good to give away that advantage, or that your systems aren't working. And also you're at a table with a bunch of other people.
Right. Well, she specifically says, no word of your situation reached my ears until your young messenger arrived on horseback. So she's letting him know that it's all out on the open. I was not personally made aware. But she's also smart because she's not blaming it on weak defenses. She's not pointing out that nothing worked. She's just saying, if it worked, I was not brought into the loop and I cannot answer this question for you.
And so that brings up his next question of, aren't you the queen in waiting? And it's obviously taken as an insult, which it should be, and it's a challenge because Kettricken obviously, is the queen in waiting. She should be looped in on all of this. Right. And it's just, it's basically implying like, you are part of the royal family and the next in line. If you knew, and you're telling me right now that you're not, like, you're lying to me, and that's terrible. Or like, aren't you the queen in waiting? Why wouldn't you know about these things? Right. And either way, it's an implication that Kettricken has to face down, which she does.
Right.
Basically straight up asking him, are you implying that I'm lying to you?
Yeah. And he is kind of ashamed, it seems, because he turns aside and says, no, that's not at all what I was thinking, which begs the question of, is this him backtracking because he's decided he trusts her, or is this him trying to make a statement of, you should have been and I'm outraged for you, it just didn't go very well? I'm just not sure.
I think it's just a political backing out of just like the horse guy from Tilth, right. Lance. If you were to say something like that, that would be treason, wouldn't it?
Fair enough.
And Duke Brawndy's like, no, I would never think of something like that ever. So the meal kind of picks up a little bit more after that. They get over the awkward silence. Mello, the bard, the minstrel, is there. And he picks up the music and they go forward, and Fitz then is reflecting on the sisters. Faith, who is the second oldest, and then Celerity, who is the youngest, are both there, and she is seeking out his eyes. Celerity is. Mm-hmm. And they lock eyes a couple times, and Fitz perceives hurt in her eyes as well. Her dark blue eyes did meet mine, and they were like wounds. I experienced a strange variety of emotions from that gaze. I was relieved that she did not seek me out as an individual to pay attention to. At the same time, I knew her coolness to me was a reflection of her father's present feelings toward all of Buckkeep. I welcomed her slighting of me. At the same time, it rankled, as I did not feel I deserved it. And this page concludes with Duke Brawndy finally being summoned by the king.
4 days in.
Mm-hmm. Queen Kettricken was not invited to that council.
Nope.
And Fitz thinks that he was not the only one who noticed that. Fitz, of course, was also uninvited. But not many people would make note of that. But the fact that she was not and Fitz was not kind of relegates them to the same status.
Right.
And relegating the queen in waiting to the same status as a royal bastard is not a,
flattering thing to happen.
Yeah. Exactly. She kind of keeps the daughters entertained a little bit. But less than an hour later, Duke Brawndy storms back down to the Great Hall and tells them to pack their things and get ready to go, because obviously it has not gone well.
Right. Well, it's been a very short meeting for something so important that has waited 3 days. Mm-hmm. So.
Exactly. Kettricken, seeing this haste and obviously knowing that he didn't get the answers that he wanted, or anything that he wanted, invites him up to the queen's garden.
Right. Well, he tells her, "My queen, I excuse myself to depart, as House Farseer will offer no aid. Burns must now tend to its own." And that's when Kettricken invites him up for tea in the garden.
One more meal, yes.
Which is a little bit odd to Fitz because...
It's a storm outside.
Yeah, there's a horrible storm. It's winter. Why would we all be going outside right now? But she doesn't give anybody any time to argue with her. She starts up the stairs and sends Rosemary and Fitz to the kitchen to grab tea and snacks, which Fitz takes over and tells Rosemary to go get warmer clothes for everybody.
Yes. So he goes off to grab the food, goes to the kitchen. Cook just gives him a tray, like, "Hey, bring this up and I'll send somebody else with the rest." And he's kind of happy that she can still boss him around.
Right. And also, I'm a little frustrated because for once, Rosemary wouldn't be around to see what's going on if she would have gone with Fitz. And Fitz kind of ruins it by sending her on an easier task that will get her there quicker. But Fitz doesn't know Rosemary's a double agent, so...
Right. Rosemary's already up there, snugly bundled, and she smiled smugly as she snitched a pastry from the edge of the tray. Lady Modesty presided over serving the food. The Queen and Duke Brawndy are standing off to the side on the tower discussing things. It is very loud because the storm is raging on and there's wind, and Fitz grabs warmed wine to bring over to them just on a pretext of joining them, basically. But also it's polite and courtesy to bring the two highest ranking people their refreshments.
Exactly.
Kettricken kind of includes him into this conversation and asking Duke Brawndy, "Lord FitzChivalry is known to you?" "Indeed, I've had the pleasure of having him at my own table." "You would not mind then if I asked him to join us in our conversation?" I wonder if Kettricken knew that Brawndy would see her request as a veiled command. And I wanted to point that out because while I do think she was being completely herself and also kind of aware that she was welcoming Duke Brawndy in with all the honors that she could give, I don't think she knows that this would be a veiled command.
No, I don't think so.
She's not... I don't think she is fully aware of the stature of the royal family still.
I think that one stems more from her version of royalty that she's grown up as her whole life, rather than noticing a cultural difference. Like, that's one of those subtle things that I think would take a really long time and people spelling it out for you. For you to realize. And so that one I'm okay with, like, a comment of, she probably didn't realize that's a thinly veiled command to other people. But I mean, before this, it was more like almost intellect based. And it's like, come on, she's smarter than that. She knows what she's doing. Duke Brawndy accepts Fitz to join them. So Kettricken sends him off to grab wine of his own and come back to them. So in this meeting, the Queen says, "There's no undoing what has been done. I grieve that we were not able to protect our folk. Yet I cannot undo what the raiders from the sea have done already. At least, perhaps, I can help to shelter them from storms to come. This, I bid you take them for the Queen's hand and heart." And what she gives Duke Brawndy is a bracelet off of her own arm. It's made of gold, and it has the largest dark opal that Fitz has ever seen in his entire life, which is apparently a very precious gemstone here.
Multiple. It's a like a full armband bracelet. It's gold snaking up her arm with mountain opals on it.
Right. Just one of them was like the biggest one he's ever seen, I remember. And I was like, wow, okay. Where'd she hide that?
Well, he specifically says, "With the dark opals of her mountains caught here and there in its web, I had never seen the dark flash of mountain opals before, but never ones of this size." So obviously all of them are massive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a very expensive piece of jewelry.
And it's a big show because it's on her. She's physically wearing it.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit touching in a way because they're mountain opals, so this is probably something from home.
Oh, definitely.
This could be a family heirloom, for all we know. And at the very least, it's probably something she looks at to comfort her and to remind her of her home. Even though her home isn't like big on showiness, they still appreciate good craftsmanship.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And you would still take anything from your homeland and, you know, just be looking at it lovingly. And she's giving it up to be sold to help her people. And I think this really underscores what being a sacrifice means and how the royals could be ruling. Instead, we get Regal, who sells off things that are not his, that mean wealth for others, not just himself. And that's just a very big contrast with Kettricken, who is taking something from her own chest of drawers before she's taking from others. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I just think it's a really interesting contrast there in leadership style.
And this whole time on the tower, his connection to Verity has grown a little bit stronger, with Verity kind of getting his interest piqued by the secret conversation that Kettricken is having with Duke Brawndy. Mm-hmm. And so he's nudging Fitz to go over there eagerly and kind of paying a little bit more attention. And when she gives this gift to Duke Brawndy, Fitz has this impulse in him. It says, "I barely resisted Verity's impulse in me to fling himself on his knees at the feet of this woman and declare her far too royal for his insignificant love." Brawndy was left stuttering his amazed thanks and vowing to her that not a penny of its worth would go to waste. Stout houses would rise once more in Fairy, and the folk there would bless the queen for the warmth of them.
Right.
After this, I just do want to say that Verity does keep quiet about the heirloom that Verity grabbed, made Fitz grab from his room and stash away and store safely. Just because this is the queen's gift. It's on the queen's tower. It's from Kettricken herself. He doesn't want to give that other gift to Kettricken to muddy the water and distract from Kettricken giving this aid over to Duke Brawndy. But also because Verity does want to see that on her eventually.
Mm-hmm. Well, also this is a muddy thing, because it seems more like Fitz is saying, I don't want to do this because I think it would take away from Kettricken's moment. And I'm doing this for Verity to remember Kettricken as the queen making a deal. So it feels almost more like Fitz's choice to not do this.
He does deliberately think about them, though, with his connection with Verity being stronger right now. He says, "I thought of the emeralds hidden in a corner of my clothes chest, but within me Verity was quiet." So it seems like he was trying to bring it to mind and kind of inquire, but Verity just didn't respond. So Fitz kind of took that as like, okay, I'll just leave this alone. Plus, it would probably be good for these reasons not to.
Right. But yeah. And also, we forgot to say that Kettricken did say, "From your king in waiting, Verity, and me." So she made sure to bring up Verity and say this is like a gift from the soon-to-be king as well, even though he's not there, which I think is also important, that she's not trying to make it seem like she's gaining favor.
Right.
And she's taking, like trying to take over the kingdom or something. I don't know. So I just thought that was another really good. She obviously has clearly thought this through. And I don't know. I just think she's so smart for it.
Yeah, definitely. And Fitz remarks on that too, because this is the Queen's Tower. And she specifically says, from me, from my hand, these are the Mountain Kingdom opals from Verity and me. And it's distancing from the official stance of the royal family that the king has given, and just as aid to Duke Brawndy himself. So obviously he's going to keep that a secret and just be thankful for it.
Right.
But not parade that around. And then conversation kind of turns to FitzChivalry. Brawndy addresses him first, and through Kettricken at least, and says, "My queen, you seem to hold this young man in considerable esteem to make him privy to your counsels." "I do," Kettricken replied gravely. "He has never betrayed my trust in him."
Which I just want to take a moment to pause. Yikes, because He has technically betrayed her trust in not telling her about her husband sitting in his skull every time they've met up for the past however many months. But anyway.
And not deliberately betraying the trust, but also betraying her trust when he literally killed her brother.
Also that, yeah.
Kind of on an accident, but still. Brawndy nodded as if confirming something to himself. He permitted himself a small smile. My youngest daughter, Celerity, was somewhat troubled by a missive from Lord FitzChivalry, especially as her older sisters had opened it for her and found much there to tease her with. But when she brought her misgivings to me, I told her that it is rare for a man who so candidly admits to what might be seen as shortcomings. Only a braggart would claim to go fearless into battle, nor would I wish to give my trust to a man who could kill and not feel heart lost afterward. As to your physical health, he clapped me suddenly on the shoulder, I would say a summer of pulling oars and wielding an axe has done you good. His hawk's eyes pierced mine. I have not changed my assessment of you, FitzChivalry, nor has Celerity. I wish you to be sure of that. I said the words I knew I must. Thank you, sir. He turned to look over his shoulder. I followed his gaze through the blowing rain to where Celerity gazed at us. Her father gave her a tiny nod, and her smile broke like the sun from behind a cloud. Faith, watching her, said something, and Celerity turned blushing to give her sister a push. My guts turned to ice when Brawndy told me, You may bid my daughter farewell if you wish.
Oh, Fitz.
I have to remember that letter that he sent to Celerity was filled with basically him opening up his heart.
Mm-hmm. It was a very the most honest he's been to anyone.
And him thinking it was going to push her away. She's 14 years old, or maybe 15 now. So it would have if Duke Brawndy wasn't also a warrior who is also seen as slightly barbaric to wield an axe.
Right,
and
which
not the
Fitz probably did not know.
Right. But also, like, he's seen war, so he knows that someone who has killed someone and hasn't felt lost or battle shock before is lying.
Yeah.
He knows that, somebody who comes to a marriage or courting somebody who just says like, oh, I'm perfect in every way is obviously lying or deceitful or trying to get somewhere.
Right.
Brawndy is, he's a duke. He's been around this stuff before. So
right.
Fitz inadvertently did what he needed to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, he's a duke in the furthest point of the duchy where the most raids happened before the war.
Right.
So it would be good to know that his future son-in-law is an axe wielder and also has no problem expressing himself to his future wife.
I think the only thing that Duke Brawndy would have been concerned about was the health thing, because Fitz brought up his trembling was still there from his weakness and sickness in the Mountain Kingdom. And now that Brawndy sees him, he's like, this guy's fine.
So bad,
He spent a whole summer of rowing a boat, so he looks good.
I do.
Got those broad shoulders,
I do wonder if Fitz is kind of called out here. Like, did Brawndy realize what Fitz was trying to do? Or do you think he thought Fitz was doing a sort of like humble brag thing here where he's like, oh, I'm not that great, but if you still like me after that, that'd be cool. You know what I mean? I'm just trying to feel out where Duke Brawndy is at this, because he seems to genuinely like Fitz.
I don't think he has any idea that Fitz could be that devious about anything of trying to push somebody away, or why would he try to push Celerity away or make these things. Right. So I think Brawndy's coming at this like Fitz wrote exactly what was happening and didn't try to sugarcoat it. I like that in a guy.
Interesting. Okay. I was just wondering, because it is a little strange that I don't want to say weak, because that's not the word I'm looking for, but like a lovey-dovey soft note was received well.
It's not that lovey-dovey soft, to be honest. It's pretty gruesome and like,
yeah. But
I'm kind of pitiful. Thank you so much for your interest in me.
It just is such a weird, I don't know, because Duke Brawndy seems so hard and strong, and like a man's man almost in my mind, but I find it very
raising
interesting.
3 daughters.
Fair enough. But it seems interesting that he is not put off by a man, number one, showing emotion, but number two, being honest.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just found that really nice, I guess. I don't know. It could have gone poorly for Fitz.
It seems that the Six Duchies do have a big tradition of having emotional reactions to things publicly, and not just, you know, some cultures that I've read in fantasy books have more of an outcrying, but it's not the closed-minded stoicism of a lot of things.
Fair.
Specifically of when somebody dies, you cut a lock of your hair off. You can cut off more than that. You might be looked down upon if you shave your full head like Beric does. But things like that, the mass grave and service that they had for the forged ones, they're not completely closed off and you have to be, you know, a stone or a rock.
Right.
So I feel like, especially with all the raids that they have, they do experience loss all the time.
Right.
And I would think, even though I'm just being an armchair psychologist here, I would think there's a temptation to become hard after that and just ignore the pain. But Duke Brawndy, being around so long, would know you're going to experience it no matter what, and it's not good to shut those things out.
Right.
So I feel like with all the loss that the Six Duchies lifestyle brings, with all the hardships that they have, they're a little bit more open to that.
That's an interesting point. I didn't think about it that way. But that does raise a question. Do you think the reason that the Six Duchies is able to be so open about emotions is because of their history with people of the wit living there? There's a higher level of people connected to literal emotions.
That could definitely be.
I mean, it might not be that we know there are people with the wit hiding. They're probably much fewer in numbers especially after what Regal does later. But before this, even, it's not super great to be known as someone who's witted.
Right.
So I don't necessarily think it's something that people know comes from the days when witted people lived amongst them in harmony. But I do wonder if that kind of comes from a magic that allows you to feel others' pain.
Definitely possible, yeah. It makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So after that basic dismissal and kind of ordering Fitz to go say goodbye to his daughter, and Fitz not wanting to ruin any progress Kettricken has made, he goes over, excuses himself, and talks to Lady Celerity. And it's very awkward.
Oh, super awkward. Well, awkward because she clearly has a huge crush on him and he clearly doesn't want to be there. Yeah. Maybe not to her because
he's a consummate actor and can do his job.
We're in his head and we know how badly he does not want this.
My heart was pounding, as was hers, I am sure, for a completely different reason. He really doesn't want to be there. He loves Molly. Like, this is it. I just have to act this out. We don't have to pursue it further. Maybe I will run away with Molly. Who knows?
And she talks about his letter. She talks about how her father explained to her how it's actually a good thing what he wrote her, and how she didn't understand why he would belittle himself. And then her father had the quote of, you know, only braggarts need to brag because no one else will brag about them. Then she also goes a little bit more in depth about how there's no better way to learn the sea than by the oar of a boat. And in her father's younger years, he also was an axe wielder. And he also has promised her and her sisters that when times get better, they can have a boat of their own to go out on the water. So they're a boating family now, and because of Fitz's letter.
I don't think just because of Fitz's letter, but
no, but she is kind of rambling. She's, you know, going point by point over everything, and we get a little bit more in depth of probably the big conversation that was had trying to convince Celerity that she does still like Fitz, which is also kind of interesting. Why wouldn't a father just let his daughter?
I think
not like.
I think she still did like him, but was just like, is he not a good person to like anymore?
Okay,
and then
yeah,
went to her father, and her father's like, no, he seems cool.
That's fair. I was gonna say, I mean, honestly, it's not the most advantageous marriage, so it's not like he couldn't just drop Fitz and be like, all right, well, you had your chance, kid.
It doesn't seem like Burns has super close ties to the royal family, though.
That's fair.
They're a duchy, but they're extremely remote as a duchy. They're the furthest away, I think. So having any sort of tie, especially to probably a prince that they admired, a king in waiting that they admired, chivalry, brings them a little bit closer. And since they're not going to marry Verity, and they probably really don't like Regal, Fitz is there.
That's fair. That's a good point.
It's still a recognized royal bastard.
That's true. That's very true. Still somebody of the Farseer line.
Yeah.
Get that lineage in there.
Exactly. And then a future Queen Desire can say, I'm more royal than you.
Yes, their children together. So she kind of falters and obviously feels a little self-conscious and says, am I chattering too much? Like, am I going on too much? And Fitz says, not at all, my lady. And then she's all like, my lady. And she turns bright red, and as if he had said something super scandalous. And he turns away and sees her older sister and Shelley laughing together at whatever he might have said, which makes him blush, which makes them laugh even more. And it's kind of a cute little scene of just a bunch of teenagers that are awkward, and they're put in this super awkward position.
And just so reference, because we hadn't mentioned it before, Shells is one of the people that Kettricken invited to the table in the Great Hall at dinner,
yes,
because she's around the same age as Faith and Celerity.
Yes.
And so after a while, they head down and change out of their clothes, and they go to bid Duke Burns farewell. And Queen is in her familiar white and purple, your favorite outfit.
Yep.
Favorite color combo. And she stood beside Duke Brawndy's horse to bid him farewell, and before he mounted, he went down on one knee and kissed her hand. Some brief words were spoken, I know not what, but the queen smiled as the winds lashed her hair about her face. Brawndy and his troops set off into the teeth of the storm. There was yet anger in the set of Brawndy's shoulders, but his obeisance to the queen showed me that as of yet, not all was lost. Celerity and Faith both looked back at me as I rode off, and Celerity dared to lift a hand in farewell. I returned the gesture. I stood watching them go, chilled by more than the rain. I had supported Verity and Kettricken this day, but at what cost to myself? What was I doing to Celerity? Was Molly perhaps right about all this? Like we've been saying the past few chapters, Fitz has been selfish thinking about this all about from his perspective. However, he is evolving slowly with some conversations and things like that, and he does think here of what is he doing to Celerity. He is deliberately leading her on. He's deliberately saying that he is interested without directly saying it.
Right.
And setting this whole thing up when he doesn't reciprocate any of those feelings that she's returning towards him.
Yeah, this is
just for political gain.
The first time we've seen Fitz think about Celerity as a person, as what he's doing to her. Not just, oh, I have to get rid of Celerity and she's this problem. And I think the problem is that he saw her in person and saw exactly the kind of feelings he probably felt, the feelings that she is having for him, and realized this is a real person with real feelings, and I've only been thinking about my feelings. And the problem is that this isn't just any other teenage girl that if, you know, he let her on a little bit and then breaks her heart, it's just, oh no, sad for us. This is a person, who has a lot of political power, who, if offended enough, could break away from the duchies and cause a big problem.
Right.
So it's becoming more and more real to him. And I'm glad he's seeing it, but also sad for everyone involved.
Oh yeah, it's a bad situation, and it really does drive it home because this is only the second time he's seen her in person.
Right.
First was a week that he spent up there to take care of Virago. After that week, he left, and she sent a letter later. He replied, and then it was all summer before she came and visited him in the winter again.
Right.
So it's been like over a year since they've seen each other last.
Yeah. And now he's even hotter because he's like big and buff. And so poor little Celerity is like, oh my gosh, I really hit the jackpot here. Like, we don't hear any mention of acne. So like Fitz is a model over here. Like, come on. Poor Celerity.
After the goodbye, we get into the second part of this chapter, which is Fitz going to see the king. He's not summoned. He's not, called upon for this. It's just him going and Fitz wondering if Verity willed it in him or if it was his own heart cautioning him not to abandon the king. Wallace grudgingly admitted me with a stern warning that the king was still not feeling completely himself and that I must not weary him. King Shrewd was sitting up before his fireplace. The air of the room was cloying with smoke. The fool was at his feet, sitting down and avoiding most of the cloud of the smoke, but Fitz had it all in his head area and was not able to avoid any of it. So lots of drugs going on in here. And he starts a conversation with Fitz. King turns to him and blearily looks at him for a few minutes as his head swayed on his neck. "Ah, Fitz," the king greeted me belatedly. "How have your lessons been? Is Master Fedrin pleased with your progress?" I glanced at the fool, who did not meet my eyes, but poked morosely at the fire. "Yes," I said quietly, "he has said my lettering is good." "That's fine. A clear hand is a thing any man may be proud of. And what of our bargain? Have I kept my word to you?" It was our old litany. Once more I considered the terms he had offered me. He would feed me, clothe me, and educate me, and in return he would have my complete loyalty. I smiled at the familiar words, but my throat closed at how the man who had said them had wasted away, and what they had come to cost me. "Yes, my king, you have," I answered softly. So we see the king here as Fitz enters the room, and he is further gone than he has been.
Mm-hmm.
The meeting with Brawndy and coming down to the dinner even 3 days before that, when Brawndy had first arrived, must have really taxed him. Because remember at the feast,
Right, he was there.
he was not out of it and just looked tired. So the king was there and he excused himself, as soon as he could, but all of that really must have taxed him greatly, and now he's just slowly losing his place in time and drugged up.
Yeah, and it doesn't help the type of drugs he's on right now. I mean, basically he's high, so that wouldn't help with your sense of time or what's going on, really.
A couple different things to keep him out of it, honestly.
Yeah, but it is sad to see. It does make me remember how I felt when my great-grandfather was going through Alzheimer's when I was really young. Just the feeling of, what do I play along? Do I say something?
Yeah.
What, you don't want to like hurt their feelings. And it's just like such a weird place to be in, of like, I don't know how to react to this person who once was different and now they are clearly not even knowing where they're at.
Being a kid in that situation is incredibly hard and difficult because of that specifically.
Right.
And for us, I had a great great grandpa as well, who was he lived a long life. He was, I believe, like 100 when he passed away. But in the last few years of his life, he also repeated things. He also asked, like, he was confusing people and things like that. It wasn't Alzheimer's specifically, which is a terrible disease. But you would just, repeat the same conversation that you had had previous times that you had met him.
Mm-hmm.
And that was fine. But it's confusing for a kid. Like, going into that, I'm just like, I don't know what to do in this situation.
Right. And even older people in general sometimes will get to a place where, without Alzheimer's, they're asking questions that you've heard before.
Yeah.
It's not as bad as when people are clearly sick. But, sometimes, I mean, humans in general, I have asked questions
do the same thing.
that I have definitely asked Luke multiple times. But it's just one of those things where you can tell the difference between, oh, they probably just forgot, and, oh, they think,
yep,
like, this is what's happening.
A different time.
Yeah. And it's just such a hard thing.
So, rereading this book and rereading these scenes with the king really, really brings to mind and really puts it in the forefront of me of how far the king has gone mentally in the past year and a half in the book time.
Yeah.
It's really sad.
Right.
Because Fitz is reminiscing about it, but as we're rereading, we can literally look back at the scenes and see how sharp he was.
Right. Not that long ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to tell if this is a physical sickness that he would have gone through no matter what, or if this is somehow sped up by the taking of his skill.
Right.
We don't really know. We'll never really get an insight to the thought process behind this. But it is just a very fast decline, and it is very sad.
Yeah, I'm really curious now if the taking of his skill is gradual or if it's all on that, like, the last week or that last night where Fitz confronts them, because he has been sick for a long time, and we find out in this chapter it is kind of a physical sickness that he's hiding from with all these drugs and his pain. And that Shrewd's skill isn't entirely gone. It's just diminished because he doesn't use it ever.
Right.
I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell the chronology of all it.
It is. But it's also, is it diminished because he doesn't use it, or because this has been going on longer than just even what the Coterie is doing? How long has Galen been taking from the king?
True. Yeah,
this could have been happening for decades, for all we know. Although I'm not sure how Galen would have found the ability to take from him earlier. Unclear.
Not
but
really sure.
We don't. There's no proof that he didn't. So I don't know.
Shrewd kind of senses Verity's connection with Fitz here, and he reaches out here. Verity? Where's Verity? He's gone on a quest, my king, to seek the help of the elderlings to drive the red ships from our shores. Ah, yes, of course he has. But just for a moment, I thought... He leaned back in his chair, then all the hair on my skin prickled up. I could feel him vaguely skilling in an unfocused, fumbling way. His mind tugged at mine like old hands seeking for a grip. I had believed him incapable of skilling anymore. I had thought he had burned out his talent years ago. Verity had told me once that Shrewd used his talent, but seldom anymore. I had set those words aside as his loyalty to his father, but the ghostly skill plucked at my thoughts like unschooled fingers at harp strings. I sensed Night Eyes hackling at this new invasion. Silence, I cautioned him.
I do want to point out that this feels a lot like in the later books when Chade is having trouble staying in his own mind.
Mm-hmm.
He also reaches out with ghostly hands that seem unskilled. And I just think it's really interesting that as the mind starts to go, the skill seems to almost want to reach out. Like it's a thing of its
familiar
own.
Things.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And it really made me remember when Chade also can't let go of Fitz and is reaching towards Fitz with the skill.
The skill really seems to center, well, it seems to circle around who you are as a person, and you get, it's stabilizes and solidified by saying, like, I am me, this is who I am, and a big part of that sense of self is your connections to other people. So I'm wondering, with that weakening, it's just reaching out to those familiar around him where
Right.
like these were strong connections.
And like this can center me again or
Yeah.
something. It's really interesting. I don't know. The skill is such an interesting magic, and I wish I knew more. Again,
Yeah.
for the millionth time that I've said it, I would love a magic book. Explain the properties to me, please, Robin Hobb.
Fitz kind of gets an idea here and asks the king permission. And I don't think he gets a response, but he moves his stool closer and grabs the king's hand. And he says, "It was like plunging myself into a rushing river. Ah, Verity, my boy, there you are." Just for a moment I glimpsed Verity as King Shrewd still saw him, a chubby boy of 8 or 9, more friendly than smart, not so tall as his big brother Chivalry, but a sound and likable prince, an excellent second son, not too ambitious, not too questioning. Then, just as if I had stepped off a riverbank, I tumbled into a black, rushing roar of skill. It was disorienting to see suddenly through Shrewd's eyes. The edges of his vision were filmy with haze. For a moment I glimpsed Verity forging wearily through snow. What's this? Fitz? Then I was whirled away, carried into the heart of King Shrewd's pain. Skill deep inside him, beyond where the herbs and the smoke deadened him, I was scorched with the agony. It was a slow-growing pain along his spine and in his skull, a pushing, crowding thing that would not be ignored. His choices were to be consumed by the agony that would not let him think, or to deaden his body and mind with herbs and smokes to hide from it. But deep inside his fogged mind, a king still lived and raged at his confinement. The spirit was still there, battling the body that no longer obeyed him, and the pain that devoured the last years of his life. I swear I saw him, a young man perhaps a year or so older than myself. His hair had been as bushy and unruly as Verity's. His eyes were wide and lively, and once his face's only lines had been from a wide grin. This was who he still was in his soul, this young man trapped and desperate. He seized on me, asking wildly, "Is there a way out?" I felt myself sinking with his grip.
Okay. So this description of Shrewd's pain and sickness was really interesting to me. I don't know if this is a real sickness or if this is something put on him by the Coterie. I do want to point out that it does say that it was a pain in his skull, pushing and crowding thing that would not be ignored, which feels like people in there.
It was also along his spine, though.
Yes. But the part of his skull, it really made me wonder, again, how much of this is skill wrought in him and how much is real. And I'm frustrated that we'll never know.
Yeah.
Because I want to know, is this something they're putting on him? Is this what happens when somebody takes part of your soul? And it's just very interesting because we have a younger version of the king asking Fitz, is there a way out? Like he's actually trapped. Like part of his mind is truly trapped somewhere. Is that a skill cage that is around this king? What's going on? And I don't know the answers to these questions, but I'm sure it is mostly actual sickness, but it is an interesting question to be asked.
I looked at this as mainly just a metaphor. Yes, there could be this image of himself, and because he's connected with Shrewd, with the skill, he sees Shrewd's image of himself and how he centers himself, and that was that young man, and that young man is what is left of his mind that isn't full of pain, that isn't full of drugs, and it's just caught underneath the pain, which is underneath the drugs, and there's no way for him to express anything that he wants. And that's kind of the metaphor I was going with. But if it was a physical manifestation, that's also a really interesting way to think about it.
Yeah, it's a very beautifully written piece of inside information, and really just the visceral reaction of this is what it looks like to be in that much pain. It's just a very interesting way to go about it. Very abstract, and I like it.
Yeah. Also, I liked Shrewd's description and the way he thinks about Verity, which gives us a little bit insight of that as well. More friendly than smart, not so tall as his big brother Chivalry, a sound and likable prince, and an excellent second son, not too ambitious, not too questioning. And that's what we've been saying before too, that Verity had grown up as the second son and he was great, but according to Shrewd here, he was always, looking up to his big brother, and his big brother was the one and he was the number two. And that's just the way it always was to him.
Right.
It wasn't indoctrinated in him. It was just
who he
Verity,
is.
Yeah, just Verity being a follower, which is completely fine. I also kind of liked the more friendly than smart.
Yeah.
Which is true in a general way, but Verity has had a lot of schooling and he is intelligent in his own right. He's just not as maneuverable in the political sphere as some other people we have seen.
As Chivalry.
And as we heard about Chivalry. Yes. Yeah.
Or Regal, really.
Yeah, exactly.
So. Poor Verity.
And with Fitz sinking in, there's a moment where Verity kind of centers everyone. He latches on to that connection before Shrewd can take him under and steadies it, and through Fitz is talking to his father, King Shrewd. Verity commands him, "Boy, contain yourself," and then speaks directly to Shrewd, and we have a little conversation here. He asks Shrewd if he's in need, because obviously Shrewd has reached out and contacted Verity. There must be something that's terribly wrong.
Right.
And Shrewd kind of says, "No, nothing's wrong. All as it has been for some time. But Verity, Burns is no longer true to us. Brawndy harbors red ships there in exchange for protection for his own villages. He has turned on us." Verity, obviously, if this is true, is extremely desperate situation, because that means one of the duchies has fallen, turned to the enemy, and is going to use their land as a staging point for the rest of the invasion. There's no saving this.
Right.
Because then they'll have homes, they'll have resources, they have a place to dock on land instead of sailing in the winter across. So Verity obviously wants to know if this is true.
Right. And he wants to know where this information is coming from.
Exactly. And Shrewd says that Regal brought them, that he has spies, and that they bring word to him, and this is what they said. And that Regal's plan is to abandon Brawndy to the Red Ship friends and to hold them off from Buck. And then when they secure their borders by cutting off Brawndy, eventually they'll turn on each other. And that's Regal's plan. So obviously Verity's like, is this really true? And and Shrewd is like, all of the spies confirm it, and also I fear that we can't trust your foreign wife anymore. Brawndy was here, and Regal marked how she dallied with him and made many excuses for private talk. He fears that she plots with our enemies to overthrow the throne. And at this point, Fitz is incredibly incensed and gets his thought to the forefront. And I think Verity hears it only. I don't think really Shrewd does. And he kind of screams out, "This is not so." The force of this denial went through me like a sword's point. For an instant I was drowning again, lost, selfless, in the flood of skill passing through me. Verity sensed it, steadied me again. And he warns Shrewd that we can't really use Fitz like this. He doesn't have the strength for it, first of all, and he's not trained. And then begs Shrewd to trust his wife, to trust Kettricken, because Verity knows that she is not false and will not betray the Six Duchies. Basically tells him to set spies upon Regal spies and just, be careful, talk with Shade about everything. And Shrewd gets a little bit of his actual attitude back. And he's like, "What, you're going to tell me how to rule? I know how to keep my throne, boy."
Which, interestingly enough, this does feel a lot like a conversation that Fitz and Shade would have. This feels a little bit like...
Yeah, I can see that.
Verity and Shrewd have a very similar relationship to Fitz and Shade, and that the younger of the two is bringing up valid concerns, and the older is trying to harbor onto the
More so
power,
Fitz
not
and Shades in the later trilogies, not
yes.
this. Not
Well,
the
a little bit
relationship
in
this
there.
one.
Oh, there's hints of it in these books where
Hints a
Fitz
little
is
bit.
like, how come I have to do these things? And Shade is like, do you not trust me?
It's usually for the better.
right, it is. But
in this one, at least.
right. It is, but it is interesting to see the parallels of the relationship of father and son
Yeah.
being shown that we also see later in Fitz's own life.
Mm-hmm. And at that point, the connection cuts off. Someone has snatched Fitz's hand away from King Shrewd's, and the fool is there and kind of yelling at Wallace, and Wallace is yelling like, what did you do to the king? And there's a whole thing because both of them are heaving with breaths. They're gasping for air like they just ran a full marathon.
Mm-hmm.
Fitz is like woozy and lightheaded.
And the fool is saying, it's both of them, not just the king. Like, I think you're killing them with your smokes. This is your fault. And in a very clever way, puts it on Wallace.
Honestly, it's true as far as he knows.
Right.
Later we learn, I think this might be a little bit of next chapter. Maybe this chapter still. They'll blend together a little bit. The fool says something like it was only a couple heartbeats.
Yes, that's this chapter.
This chapter? Okay. So all that he knows is that Fitz got up, sat next to the king, touched his hand, and a couple moments later, both of them were gasping for air.
Right. And clearly in pain.
Yes. There's a sharp edge of fear to the fool's voice. It's both of them. They were talking together, quite calmly, and then suddenly this. Take the damn smoke sensors away. I fear you have killed them both. Silence, fool. Do not accuse my healing of this. But I heard the hurry in Wallace's step as he made the rounds of the room, pinching out the burning twists in each sensor or capping them with brass cups. And Fitz kind of sits there to regain his senses, and Regal comes in, kind of rushing in, and I'm sure Wallace warned him or told him about it, or he was coming eventually anyways because
he knew Fitz was there to begin with.
Fitz was in the room, yeah. And so Regal asks him like what had happened, demands what to know, and Fitz can't really answer. He just shakes his head, and then Regal turns to Wallace and immediately asks about the king. Wallace says, he seems to be steadying, Prince Regal. I do not know what overcame him. There was no sign of a struggle, but he is as weary as if he had run a race. His health will not stand this sort of excitement, my prince. Of course, again, Regal turns to Fitz and is like, what did you do to him? Fitz is very truthful here. He's like, I didn't do anything. We were talking quietly. Suddenly I felt overwhelmed, dizzy, weak, as if I were losing consciousness. I turned my gaze to Wallace. Could it have been the smoke? Wallace kind of rambles here, and he gives away a little bit of what the king has been feeling, and Regal does not like it. Wallace says, perhaps it could have been the smoke. Well, it seems every day I must make it stronger for it to have any effect at all, and still he complains that... Silence! Regal cut him off with a roar. He gestured at me as if I were awful. Get him out of here, then get back here to tend the king. King reaches out to Fitz again with his skill, and Fitz is like, okay, I gotta leave. Like, I can't go through that again. And the fool escorts him out.
Yeah.
This is a scary reaction to what's happening, and I'm sure, I don't specifically remember what the king has to say to Fitz about this later on, or if they even talk about it directly, but I'm sure he's reaching out again because that was the first time he's had to have a conversation without feeling pain and being fully aware of his thoughts.
Right.
Because it's directly connected to his mind, to his son.
Mm-hmm.
And he's able to like hold a conversation, so it's an escape. That was like the escape that he was looking for.
That's what he needs. And it's really sad. And it's hard because Fitz cannot help him this way. It is not healthy for probably either of them, but mostly Fitz.
He can't even walk out on his own. He needs the fool there to lean on, to escort him down to his room.
He's lucky that they didn't take more.
Yeah, exactly. The fool doesn't leave him because it's not safe for him to be alone and this week, which is...
True.
true, and probably also a little bit of the fool, like, I don't want to have them put a bag on your head either.
Right, yeah.
Also, the fool wants answers.
Yeah, he wants to know what the heck that just was.
Yes. I told you I am all right, I said with some annoyance. All I wanted to do was lie down. Are you? And how is my king? What did you do to him back there? I did nothing, I gritted out as I sat down on the foot of my bed. My head was beginning to pound. Elfbark tea, that was what I needed just now. I had none. So, the fool obviously saw something. He saw Fitz ask permission to the king, went over and touched them, and then all of a sudden they were gasping. Mm-hmm. So he kind of knows Fitz did something, but it happened so quick that they have no idea really what happened.
Right.
And Fitz is just kind of begging him, like, please, can you get some Elfbark tea, like, for me?
Right. And he gets the fool to stop asking about it by saying, it is not for me to tell you what the king did to me. If he wants to tell you, he will.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And he gets the fool to agree to a bargain, basically. He'll leave him alone right now. He'll grab Elfbark tea from Lacey, get some of that, and then Fitz will tell him, you know, what had happened as much as he could.
Right. Well, at this point, who cares if the fool understands what skilling is? Why not just say we were skilling? Because clearly the fool knows about Chade, so he knows everything. Why not just let him in on this too?
Right.
I don't know. It doesn't, I mean, Fitz isn't thinking super clearly right now. He's obviously in a lot of pain.
Definitely not.
But it feels like a weird thing to be this sensitive about telling the fool when the fool knows everything anyway.
Right. And so Fitz tries to sort these things out in his head through his extreme headache right now. The things that he just learned, that Regal had spies or claimed to, that Brawndy was a traitor, and that Regal was claiming that his spies told him that Brawndy was a traitor. Mm-hmm. Fitz himself suspected that Brawndy was as much as a traitor as Kettricken was.
Yeah. Very clever. Very clever, Regal. That is a really great way to get rid of people you don't want. Just accuse them of being against the crown. Yeah. And Kettricken isn't necessarily the most popular, especially not with the people he's bringing in. So, yeah, it'd probably be pretty easy to put in some doubt and say, she was awful nice to Brawndy, and he's definitely a traitor. So what does that say about her? I don't know. I don't think he came up with this idea on his own, but if he did, bravo. Yeah. Great villain's plan. And he would have gotten away with it, too.
Fitz, as he's thinking about these, turns his mind to what he was actually feeling inside of Shrewd's head, excuse me. And he just is thinking about the pain. Had not Chade bid me simply to observe as I had been taught to find an answer to my question? And that question was, why was Chade feeding him all those poisons, or why was Shrewd accepting that? Mm-hmm. It had been plain before me all the time, if only I had not been so blinded with fears of traitors and plots and poisons. A disease was eating King Shrewd, gnawing him away from the inside. He drugged himself against the pain, in an effort to have some corner of his mind to himself, a place where the pain could not come and rob him. If someone had told me that a few hours ago, I would have scoffed. Now, lying on my bed, trying to breathe softly because the slightest movement triggered another wave of agony, I could understand. Pain. I'd only been enduring this for a few minutes, and I'd already sent the fool running for Elfbark. Another consideration pushed itself into my mind. I expected this pain to pass, that by tomorrow I would rise up free from it. What if I had to face it every moment for the rest of my life, with the certainty that it was devouring whatever hours were left to me? No wonder Shrewd kept himself drugged.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just added on to the look that we already got inside of him, and that's a very succinct way to put it. There is something that is killing Shrewd and keeping him in extreme agony that floored Fitz, a healthy 17-year-old boy, with pain. And Shrewd is trying to keep a corner of his mind free from that so he can maybe think in some lucid hours.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely eye-opening for Fitz. I think also the reader.
Yeah.
But I do want to ask a quick question. Do we think some of this pain is coming from his head wound that causes him a massive headache whenever he uses the skill?
It definitely could be.
I mean,
I feel like some of the headache is, but also Fitz seems to be feeling pain throughout his whole body right now. So I think some of the headache might be from that, but it's hard to tell where that blends in, where it stops, and you know, especially for Fitz as he's just trying to breathe as shallowly as possible because breathing heavily hurts.
Oh, I've been there. Yuck. I hate that when you're just like full body aches and pains. I can't imagine that times 10. Like, yeah,
I've never experienced a broken rib, but I've heard people with broken ribs say that since you can't really put it in a cast and you have to breathe, it is extremely painful to take deep breaths, to cough, to sneeze, to do any of that. So they just try to spend their whole time breathing shallowly and not doing anything.
Ooh, yuck.
And so Fitz is laying down in his bed. Eyes are closed. He hears the door open and close quietly. When I did not hear the fool begin to make tea, I forced my eyes open. Justin and Serene stood inside the doors of my room. They stood frozen, as if in the lair of a savage beast. When I shifted my head slightly to look at them, Serene's lips actually drew back as if she snarled. Within me, Night Eyes snarled back. The tempo of my heart increased suddenly. Danger here. I didn't hear you knock, I managed to say. Each word was edged in red as my voice echoed in my skull. So we get the entry of
the
villains.
Coterie.
Yeah. More villains. Serene, of course, is very nasty to Fitz, as all of the Coterie is, just saying, I didn't knock, don't really need to knock kind of attitude. Fitz is praying for the fool to come back to interrupt this because he can't deal with anything right now, really.
Right. He's hoping that he looks nonchalant. He's hoping it looks like he fears them so little that he's just hanging out on his bed waiting for them to leave, and not that they can tell how weak he actually is, because he cannot stand on his own. There's no way he can fight.
And they say that they don't need anything, and then Justin starts to skill towards Fitz's mind and is clawing through his brain. And my thought, which I think is correct, is that they were drawn or told to come here because they felt that connection, that whole skill conversation. There was something going on. Shrewd was talking to somebody through Fitz, so Fitz might have that connection to the pretender, Verity.
Right. Right, and they're trying to find the link.
Yep, exactly.
But interestingly enough, while Justin is pushing through his mind, Verity says he'll kill you with his clumsiness because he doesn't know what he's doing. And I wonder how they can be so horribly trained and yet take Shrewd's skill away without being noticed. Is that the only thing they're highly skilled at?
Shrewd is very drugged up, and no one else can do the skill there.
I guess, but I mean, even before he was drugged up, they were doing it, or as drugged up as he is now. He didn't notice at all.
I feel like the things that they do, and they do well, they were trained for specifically. These other things they weren't trained to do. Why would they be? Galen trained them for a specific purpose, and that was to carry messages, to look through each other's eyes, to communicate with one another, and probably to drain skill. And the things that, require a little bit more finesse just aren't there because they didn't have an actual skill master teaching them.
I guess, yeah.
Remember, Galen didn't finish his training.
That's true.
He was barely powerful enough to even be called a journeyman.
And also, it's been noted multiple times that all of his students are weak and not well taught at all anyway.
Yeah. And they could have been stronger.
Yeah.
But the way that he trained them just left him weaker than they should have been.
Yes.
And that's where Fitz describes this. Skill nudged me clumsily, Justin prodding at me. My king's use of me had left my mind as raw as a bleeding wound. Justin's awkward skilling was like having cat's claws rake my brain. Shield yourself, Verity was a whisper. Serene was smiling. And he describes it as Justin was pushing into my mind like a hand shoving into a pudding. My senses jumbled suddenly. He smelled foul in my head. He was a terrible, rotten greenish yellow and sounded like spurs jingling. Shield, Verity pleaded. He sounded desperate, weak, and I knew he was trying very hard to hold the tattered pieces of myself together for me. He's going to kill you with sheer stupidity. He doesn't even know what he's doing. Help me. From Verity, nothing. Our link was fading like perfume in the wind as my strength dwindled. We are pack. Justin slammed back against the door of my room so hard his head bounced. It was more than repelling. I had no words for what Night Eyes did from within Justin's own mind. It was a hybrid magic. Night Eyes using the wit through a bridge of the skill had created. He attacked Justin's body from within Justin's mind. Which is pretty cool.
Yeah, also super scary.
Yeah.
Everybody's freaked out, including, I think, Fitz himself. I mean, he's also trying just to survive.
He kind of gets a visual image of Night Eyes going crazy and like going with jaws and scratching and everything like that, because he has that connection with Night Eyes as well, and finally gets through to him to say, like, don't kill him.
Yeah.
And Night Eyes kind of calms down, but there's visible scratches and punctures, not blood, but like visible claw marks and welts and things on Justin's
that
skin
are disappearing,
that eventually disappear,
which is wild. How do you do that?
I feel like it's since the brain has a pain center in it. If you trigger that in certain points, like, you'd be able to simulate pain in certain ways.
Right.
And I feel like it's similar,
for sure,
from like a real world to a fantasy world. It's a similar concept of Night Eyes just raking through Justin's brain, basically.
Yeah.
And yeah.
But my big question is, how is this magic attack? Explain to me the magic logic behind his attacks showing but disappearing quickly. Is it because he's not physically harming him? It's all in his mind. It's still painful, clearly.
Maybe.
Also, Justin wets himself out of fear of this incident. So, like, something's happening. But could he have actually killed him?
I think so.
I don't know. It's just wild.
I think he could have.
That's fair. But it's really interesting to see the depth of this hybrid magic.
Yeah. Using the skill as a connection to different minds, and then having a wit link attack the emotions and the feelings of somebody else.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I don't know. The implications of it could stretch forever, but it never gets investigated because Fitz is pretty unique.
Right. Well, this feels a lot like bloodbanding in Avatar: The Last Airbender, where
forbidden technique. It's too dangerous.
Yeah, where it's not morally right, and so you shouldn't do it. And it's like more people are probably out there with the capability, but they don't even know it, because who else is out there getting attacked by the skill with their wit partner while they're
you also have to be skilled.
State? Yeah, you also have to be skilled. Which is clearly not impossible for witted people to be.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's very interesting. Also, clearly you can have more than one type of magic in you, because we know that Chade can scry, that he can see the future in water.
Or the present. We don't really.
Yeah.
We're not really clear. Yeah.
But he has some sort of magic in that realm, but also has the skill. I don't know if that's as close of a link, so I don't know if there's much more you could do with that, you know, the same way you can with a wit. I wonder if the further away they are in the circle, the less they have an interconnector.
Right.
But now I'm very curious what all's going on there, and what are the possibilities.
And so when Night Eyes hears Fitz saying, don't kill me, like, don't kill him, Fitz gets this image of him that he came and stood astraddle me, guarding me. Almost I could hear his panting breath, feel the warmth of his hide. I had no energy to question what had happened. I curled myself into a puppy, sheltered beneath him. I knew no one could get through Night Eye's defense of me. And Serene, obviously, is hysterical at this point. Like, what was that? Like, what was that? What happened?
Yeah.
And she had Justin by the shirt front and had dragged him to his feet. There were livid marks on his throat and chest, but through barely opened eyes, I could see them fading rapidly. Soon there was no sign of Night Eye's attack, save the wet stain spreading down the front of Justin's trousers. And Serena's like shaking him, and Justin, open your eyes, Justin. Basically what happened. And the fool wonderfully steps in at that moment and says, what are you doing to that man?
Yeah.
Expressing outrage and surprise. He puts on the performance because a maid is passing at that moment, arms full of shirts. She looked in, startled, and then stopped to stare. And there's a little page girl carrying a basket behind her that looked as well. So the fool gets into this and says, what's the meaning of this? And Serene accuses Fitz of attacking Justin while she's sobbing. Because obviously this is a horrifying thing to experience. You're standing there, you think you are all powerful, you're digging through a mind of an enemy, and all of a sudden your partner is getting huge claw rent marks across their face and jaw marks and stuff. They're flung backwards, head hitting the door, and then all of a sudden they're like almost completely out of it and all the marks are gone. Like, what? What happened?
Right, yeah, no, it's a crazy thing. And also would make you a little worried, like maybe we shouldn't be messing with him.
Right.
And it would probably be a little bit of a brain breaker because they've been basically indoctrinated to think that Fitz is useless and has no strength and he is not very powerful.
Yeah.
And here Fitz is on his basically deathbed defending himself against you who you think are all powerful. It would be really hard to understand on a like philosophical level.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And they use it further on. It's like, oh, you're just grabbing your strength from something else. Obviously, that wasn't you who attacked him.
Right,
So
right. It can't possibly be Fitz.
they lied to themselves again and again.
Which, to be fair, it isn't Fitz.
Yeah, true. And so Serena's saying like, oh yeah, Fitz attacked him, and the fool is pointing out the obvious to any passerby that no, you're the only one who is shaking that boy. Obviously, you did something to him. This man is on his deathbed. He couldn't have done anything. And oh, by the way, you serving little girls, don't gossip about this. No one should hear about this. Wink, wink.
Yeah.
Fool asks him, like, answer me truthfully. Was she really trying to force herself on you because it's the fool and he was
Right.
twisting the words around? And Fitz answers, no, my voice came out like I was sick. Like I felt sick, exhausted, and groggy. I was sleeping. They came quietly into my room. Then, I think I have had too much smoke this night. And I agree, there was a fine disdain in the fool's voice. Such an unseemly show of lust I have seldom seen. The fool spun suddenly on the peeping page and maid. This shames all of Buckkeep, to find our own skilled ones behaving so. I charge you to speak of this to no one. Let no gossip about this begin. He turned back suddenly on Serene and Justin. Serene's face was flooded scarlet, her mouth open in outrage. Justin pulled himself to a sitting position at her feet and sat, swaying. He clutched at her skirts like a toddler trying to stand.
I do not lust after this man, she said coldly and clearly, nor did I attack him. So she is super embarrassed and does not want anyone thinking she would ever have lustful thoughts.
And she's going back to angry instead of just hysterical and upset and scared about what happened. So threatens Fitz and then storms off with Justin in tow. Fitz kind of gets in the last word. She spins around and says, I will get to the bottom of this. And he says, but in your own chambers, please. I managed to lift a hand and point at the open door. He watches the fool walk away with the tea and is extremely upset because he's still in a ton of pain. Serene is gone. Justin is in tow with her. And Fitz doesn't even try to return to his bed after he closes the door. He just slides down the wall to sit with the back to the door. He felt raw. My brother, are you dying? No, but it hurts. Rest. I will stand watch. I cannot explain what happened next. I let go of something I had clutched all my life without being aware of gripping it. I sank down into soft, warm darkness, into a safe place, while a wolf kept watch through my eyes.
What do you think the thing is that he let go of?
I think it's his humanity. I think I think this is the first thing that they kind of bring back when Fitz goes into Night Eyes' body, or they try to coax him into Night Eyes' body when he's dying. I think this is the first time that he actually like lets go of that barrier of like, we have to stay separate. There's, I am me kind of thing. It's Fitz letting go of all of himself and just
interesting
letting go,
Sure. My thought was it was more of his need to constantly be aware that he is going to die in some capacity. Like he's always been aware that he needs to be watchful and know what's going on around his surroundings. And for once, he is trusting somebody fully to protect him and not worrying about anybody coming to attack him.
Oh, interesting. I took the all my life more literally than just kind of like a figurative of when he was aware.
That's fair, but I mean, all of his life basically starts when he's at Buckkeep. Well, not Buckkeep, but when he is Fitz the bastard, because he doesn't remember his beginning times. And I don't know, it makes me feel like even then he knew something was wrong and that he needed to be careful.
Let us know what you guys think. What he let go of. What he sank into. Whether that's even a good thing for Fitz to do.
Yeah.
Email us at isfitzhappy@gmail.com or message us on any of our social medias, isfitzhappy at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. This was a very interesting chapter.
Yes.
A little bit shorter than last one.
Only a tad.
Only a slight bit, yes. But it also escalates things quite dramatically in continuance with last chapter. Last chapter kind of started everything off. And this, we get the whole more added to the Beastman rumors that come about later, and Fitz getting connected with the Wit because of his attack on Justin. We get Fitz and Shrewd's skill connection here, which eventually leads to Shrewd's death.
Mm-hmm.
And a reintroduction of Serene and Justin, who are the one who kill Shrewd later.
Right. Which also should be a red flag that something is going on, because why did they even come?
Right.
Why are they here? What's going on that we don't know?
Exactly.
Clearly, we all know.
Yeah.
But as first-time readers, it's something that's really easy to overlook as like, wait, why did they show up? And I guess it's easy to think maybe Regal sent them, but for what reason? Regal doesn't know anything about the skill.
Right, yeah. They have to be keeping a close watch over that and over the king, seeing any communication, that sort of stuff.
Right.
Well, thank you so much for listening in this week, this episode.
We look forward to hearing what you guys have to say.
Yeah.
So now it's my favorite part of the podcast, talking about what you guys brought up to us.
You don't like talking to me, huh?
You're fine, I guess, but but I know everything you're going to say. I don't know what all our internet friends will say.
I guess.
So this week, I first want to start out by shouting out Little Red 207 on Instagram for giving us the idea to add highlights to our Instagram story to Instagram. So now you guys can all see all of the honorable memeshins that I make every week forever. And I also realized how many memes I've been making every week, which is a little bit wild.
Every week she'll come over to my desk as I'm editing and show me like a list of pictures like, I don't know if I've made enough this week. And that number has been going up and up like every single week.
Yeah.
So
Well, I don't know. It just feels if we're going to have an extra section for it, there should be enough to show, you know? But no, it's a really fun thing for me to do. And so I am surprised we didn't think about it before. So thank you, Little Red, for reminding us that we have the option to let everyone see all of the past memes.
yeah.
And enjoy them if they would so choose.
And we're, just as a reminder, we're also always taking submissions if you have a meme about the general story, about general characters, or specifically, as Emma usually does, focusing on the last episode or the last chapter.
Right.
We're accepting all memes.
All meme always. We're going to move on to Facebook now, where I want to shout out to Irene again. Irene always has really interesting inputs. And so I want to bring up that they, number one, reiterated something that we heard last week from some of you guys, that Regal is getting away with this because the people have been indoctrinated into this mindset of Regal being the good prince.
Yeah. And specifically believing him because he is the present Farseer. He is the more visible one because the people of the Six Duchies are not educated. They usually can't really read. They're just there to accept the rule from the Farseers because the Farseers have a mystical ability. They are named after specific traits. They rule by mysticism, as Irene puts it.
Yes.
So with Verity being out of the public perception, Regal was there to step in and direct all of that, all of the public's perception and all of the public's knowledge and view of the things towards his side.
Right. And they don't know all the intricacies and little things that are going on. Fitz knows so much and notices so much because he is a spy. As much as we harp on him for not doing his job well, he does still know more about the palace intrigue than most other people do, even if they're really good at gossiping. So it's good to be reminded of that. They also talked about how it's amazing how Robin Hobb writes these characters with so many real qualities that we all feel like they're our acquaintances that we're talking about.
Yeah. Which is true. Which is true. She's a great character writer, and that's mainly what these stories are about. It's about the characters and the development and the relationships between them.
Right. And it's funny how your opinions of those characters can change on read-throughs, on just different points of your life, probably affecting how you're reading those people. And Irene brought this up as a funny thing that they actually didn't like the Fool the first read through and thought until book 3 of this series that it was just a useless Fool's just a useless person.
And somehow annoying. And
very annoying, which is very fair. I was always intrigued by the Fool personally, just because he's so weird.
But if you're like enamored with just reading through Fitz's eyes, the Fool is super annoying.
Oh, for
he just
sure.
comes in and makes fun of Fitz and then walks away like he's so smart.
Right. Which I think I enjoy because that's what I wish I could do to Fitz, but
But on subsequent read-throughs, Irene's like, now, I appreciate every little scene. And I totally forgot that they beat him and destroyed his room, so I was really mad when that happened, which is true.
It is.
It's a heartbreaking scene when you find out that, like, oh, this mystical, mysterious little dancing, cartwheeling creature is actually like a person that is affected by the things that are going wrong in this story.
Yeah. No. And it's really crazy how often something will come up in the book that I don't remember happening, and it feels like a pretty big event.
Right.
But I mean, there's 16 books.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's fair that once in a while an event or two slips past, but it is fun to reread and think about the butterfly effect of all these events. Also, we would like to thank Ellen for commenting. This one is on a little bit older of a chapter, and this is about Verity and Fitz's relationship back in chapter 3 of this book, where we were talking about how it's such a weird thing that Verity goes between
being friendly to being the reprimanding Fitz to
yes. And their theory is that it's a little bit of Verity using Fitz as a stand-in for his brother, and whenever he goes back to the reprimanding, it's to remind them both that he's the older one now, and it's some of the sting is from remembering the loss of the brother and really feeling that harder. And I thought that was a really interesting take, and I hadn't thought about it like that, of Verity forgetting the line because he's thinking of his brother.
And I mean, they look pretty much exactly alike.
Yeah.
Thinking about that always reminds me of the scene in Harry Potter, the 5th one, where Sirius is, Harry goes to the Ministry of Magic to save Sirius, but Sirius was never in danger, and Sirius comes to save him, and he calls him James by his father's name. Mm-hmm. So it just reminds me of that, like, that loss does instill in you, and people who look similar, sometimes you might, impart some of your feelings towards that person, towards that different person.
Yeah. No. As someone who is a carbon copy of my mother, it is a very strange feeling to have strangers, basically, that are family members, just people you don't get to see very often, come up and just say, oh, you look just like your mom and you're a little carbon copy, and talk about your mom to you, or to me, I suppose, and act as though I am the same person in any way. And it's a very strange feeling that I have personally gone through. So it is weird how people impart the feelings that they have towards one person to another.
Yeah. So that could definitely be happening.
Yeah.
The last thing that we have for Facebook is a wonderful message that we got from Daphne. And they just wanted to comment again that when Fitz is calling out Mir when he was sick, it's actually mother in French. Thank you again for pointing that out.
Yes.
As Emma and I, in the past, were just kind of speculating on whoa, what could that be? Is it his actual mother's name? And
right.
All this one is just straight up translation of mother.
Right. Well, it is good to remember that Mir kind of looks the way it's written, like come here.
Yeah, right.
And I don't know what that's called, but like a contraction of the word, like a southern way of spelling come here. Which is another thing that could definitely make it confusing for someone who only speaks English, reading the English version. But it is good to hear from our French listeners to let us know that we just are uncultured and need to think of other languages first. So thank you. And also loved the regal hate that was sent our way. We always appreciate. So thank you guys again for reaching out. We get lots of joy from hearing from you guys and just hearing what you guys think of situations. It's really fun to have this kind of big collective book club, and every week I look forward to the things that we missed or messed up, because you guys usually catch it and it's really fun. So thank you guys for joining us on this journey.